So when you walk into a new place, what makes you feel welcome?
Me. Smiles.
Somebody smiles. Me, Bree, makes you feel welcome. Okay? Is that what you said?
Someone asks how you are.
Somebody asks how you are. Okay?
Says welcome. Of course.
Okay, says welcome.
Can I help you?
Can I help you? What makes a space feel welcoming to you?
Sunlight filtering through the windows.
Sunlight filtering through windows. Okay, we don't feel quite so welcome in places without light. Okay? Warmth. Okay? In the winter. Cool in the summer. Okay? Anne-Marie. Okay? People you haven't seen in a long time, getting to see people. Okay?
Just the welcoming posture. Even if they don't say anything, you
Okay.
can tell if you're welcome in a space or not.
Okay, stand up and show me what a welcoming posture is.
Well, I don't know.
And come out here.
I just have it.
Show me an unwelcoming one. Wow. Wow, there's no shortage of modesty in this congregation, apparently.
Come into me. I'm walking in the door. Do what you normally do.
Well, I would say hello. Is this the first time you've been here? Are you visiting?
Oh, that's way too much.
That's me.
Okay.
No, it's the posture that you have. You're looking at me and you're
Right.
Yeah.
But also, when I don't see people come in, which I usually don't, I notice who's here and who's new. And I try to just at least speak to them to say hello, to give peace. And the second time, oh, you came back. No, but I mean,
Without
I
sounding
notice-
desperate. We don't want to sound desperate. That's not it.
No, but I notice when I go into a church, because I visit lots of churches, it's the posture of people. I can walk in and I can feel, oh boy, let me get out of here. Or I can walk in and feel this is going to be a nice visit. So I don't know how to describe it, but it's just the aura we admit if you're welcoming to other people or not.
Okay, I want all of you to take a posture of unwelcome from your seat. Okay, arms are folded. That's interesting. That like half of you just did that. Okay? People start looking down, looking up, looking around. Okay? Now make a posture of welcome. How would you let people know that, okay, smile, a wave. Everybody's face lit up, okay? Everybody's face lit up. I don't want to make this ding, okay? So, how we hold our bodies, what we do with our faces. Now, one of the things, Bree?
Could I ask you to maybe move, because I can't look at you, because I'm being blinded by the beautiful sunlight.
Blinded by the light. Okay,
Thank you.
that's just my halo. Oh, wait.
Humbleness abounds.
The humbleness of, that's right, we're going with the theme of humility today. Okay, so.
Get it all out before Lent.
That's right, get it all out before Lent, or rather, repent of it during Lent. It's the option that we have. Okay, so how we hold ourselves, how we sit, provides a sense of welcoming and belonging. A space, right? There's light that comes in. We make sure that things are accessible. This gap isn't by accident right here. This gap is for people who have wheelchairs. Now, we don't have many of those, so we may put some chairs in here. Chairs, as opposed to pews, are actually quite accessible because you can move chairs around in ways that you can't necessarily move pews around. Heavy chairs, though, that help people get up. Arms on chairs, that's something that's helpful. We're going to have to solve that problem with the chairs that we have. We used to have a playground, an area right up here with a rug for kids. We took it out primarily for a funeral, and we may put it back. But that signals automatically in the space there is a place for kids, and we chose to put it in the front, not in the back. And a part of that is because I think if you want kids to love liturgy, they better see liturgy. And nobody sees the liturgy from the back. You see it from the front. And so we created a space in the front where they could see. Okay, we make our children welcome. Okay, we use space, okay. So how we set up the space, what we do, frankly, from the moment you come by this building, we should be signaling our welcome. And I think that's actually one of our weak things at St. Philip, because there's too many people who I'm like, oh yeah, I'm at the church across from Dishman. They're like, there's a church there? I'm like, yeah, right next to the Albina Library in Dishman. And they're like, oh, that's a church? We're just not very good. Like our building is a little bit beige, our sign kind of blends in. We're not actually very good at signaling, hey, we're here. Come and visit us, come and enjoy. And this vinyl sign is one piece of kind of trying to shift that a little bit. But there's things that matter about how we build ourselves, how we present ourselves around hope.
Like when we work on Saturdays, I always put the sign out in front.
Okay?
And that's a way maybe we could put something out to say our door is open.
Yep. Okay, so we have signs that we put out on the sidewalk. We actually do it for Saturday lunch. We also do it when we're open during the week, and I put it in the middle of the sidewalk or very close to it so that people walking by have to kind of run into it or go around it because it makes them see it. Well, it's fortunately we have a very wide sidewalk. And so people can see it and engage with it. Okay, so the welcome that we create doesn't just start with, it's not just the greeters, though we're about to spend a little bit of time talking about that in particular. But it's how we present ourselves to the world around us. It has to do with the flyers that we put out there, the stuff we put on the website. Everything that we do signals whether we want people to come in or not, whether we're welcome to new people or not. Whether we're going to be welcome to children or people with disabilities or age or not, okay? Signage inside the church, where are the bathrooms? Where do you go to come in? Who helps guide you along? One of the things that this church is good at is welcoming people who come in. And so I want to talk a little bit about welcoming. There are some things that we do specifically around welcoming people as they come into the church. And some of it has to do with safety, and some of it has to do with just sort of the logistics of a service, and some of it has to do with making sure that that people know that they're welcome to be in here. So what I've given you is basically, I've written up sort of the requirements of the liturgical ministry of a greeter. Now, the first thing I want you to note is it's a liturgical ministry. Okay, it's not some extra thing. It's not just some kind of job. It's a part of our liturgy. Everything that we do, whether it's the altar guild preparing the space by setting the colors and filling the oil on the candles and whatnot and making sure that we have flowers, everything that we do goes to this time that we spend together on Sundays. That's how important we think of it. So a greeter is a liturgical ministry. You are a part of the liturgy. Not just because you bring the elements forward, but also because you are creating that welcoming space. You're the first space that people see. And so we always try, at least, to have a greeter kind of by these doors and one by the front doors. We have greeters, they have the bulletins available for people. Greeters are available to answer questions. If people aren't sure where things are. Greeters there are to identify, oh, this person doesn't look terribly familiar to me. Are they new to this community? Or maybe they're just a person who hasn't been around. We welcome them, make sure they know where the bathroom is, escort them into the church, give them a suggestion as to where to sit. It's helpful for those of us, and I want you all to listen to this really well, it's helpful for those of us who are comfortable in this space and who get here earlier to sit down here, which y'all never do, because new folks then can sit in these pews because it's a little bit awkward, right, to walk in front of people. So part of welcoming is, as a congregation, deciding to create a space here where newer folks can come in, people who are late can come in, people who want to sit in the back, they kind of don't want to be known yet, they can come in. So sit this way, sit towards the front, give some of the more anonymous spaces to the people who are new. Quick question, Janet.
I'd like to make a comment, especially in terms of what you were saying, because I think
Uh-huh.
I don't want people rushing.
Yep.
I'm a little, I don't know what the proper
Okay.
thing is gonna be, so having a bullet and a smile,
Okay.
maybe, this
Okay.
is enough. Too many questions, too much, might make me feel, ooh, they want me to join right
Yep.
away.
Yeah, so a part of welcoming is there's a balance, right? There's a recognition, you kind of got to get a sense a little bit of the person. There's a recognition of, do they seem like a person who wants to like, oh, it's so nice to meet you. That's a person that maybe you can ask more questions of. If they're a person who simply wants to take the bulletin and just doesn't seem to want to answer a lot of questions, don't ask, okay? There are introverts in the world who think a question is a hostile act. Just don't do it, okay? Let them have a seat. Tell them, enjoy sitting in the back. Don't introduce them in the middle of the service unless they want you to, okay? I know that there are some people here in this church who love to call out the new people that are here and introduce them. Please check with them first, because if you had done that to me when I first walked into an Episcopal church, I would have not come back. Because I came specifically because I wanted to be anonymous. I was not interested in talking to anybody at that point. I just needed God and a church and some music and a back pew, okay? So a part of it is the greeter not only greets the person, but gets a sense of who they are, okay? Are they new? Do they want to be connected? Ask their name. Hi, I'm Maria. What's your name? Introduce yourself. Ask their name. Part of the reason we ask for people's names is also an issue of safety. Because one of the things that a greeter is responsible for is actually keeping an eye on people in the congregation and who might be more agitated or not. I don't know if you remember, but when the Supreme Court when the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, wow, did I say that? Wow, I can't speak. Roe versus Wade, thank you. A number of mainline denominations were threatened. Seriously enough that the FBI called the main Episcopal Church, who then called all of our bishops and said, we have credible threat that people who object to abortion may do something violent in churches that are known for supporting women's rights, and especially the right to abortion. And they sent us a link to something that we should go read. And I read it, and I will find the link, and I will make it available on to those of you who greet regularly. Probably just make it available to all of you. I read it, and I thought, well, this is what a church should be doing anyways, right? You say hello to somebody. You welcome them in. You ask them their name. You hand them a bulletin. You invite them to a seat. Immediately there, you have an opportunity to get a sense of who that person is. If somebody is doing something that sort of sets off your little antenna, keep an eye on them. Maybe you go sit next to them and say, hi, can I help you? If they're agitated, if they're moving a lot. Do you need the bathroom? Can I offer you some water? Some way of making a connection. Studies have shown that reduces the hostility and the anger of people who are coming in and who are agitated. Now, it doesn't always work, but it is a profound way of not only reducing the anger and the hostility of someone who's agitated, but of just being kind, of welcoming somebody. So greeters come in, they welcome people, they make sure that people are comfortable, they try to get a sense of who that person is. If it's at the beginning of the service and you catch the name and there's time, come and tell me their name. I don't know if you noticed, but at the peace, I always make sure I go to the new people in church and I ask their names, and I do that in part because I name people when they come to receive the Eucharist. That's a part of how I can welcome people, is remind people that you are named before God, you have been baptized into Christ, and this Eucharist is for you, Bernadine. It's not just for everybody, it's for you, Pat. And so I have that opportunity to welcome people at the Eucharist by giving their names. So if you can help me out by telling me their names, super helpful, because I have to repeat it a couple times. I often forget names the first time that they're given to me. Okay? So being a greeter involves welcoming people, inviting them to sit down. It also involves some very specific parts of the service. Okay? And that, again, is an act of welcoming and of bringing the gifts that we have to the table before us. So greeters run the collection and the offertory. Okay? And so the greeter, either the greeters bring forward the chalice and the bread, or first it's just the chalice it's the chalice, the paten, the burse, and the corporal, and a purificator. And when we get to setting the altar table, I will show you all of those pieces. Okay, but that's that stack that happens there. It's a chalice, it's a plate, it's a napkin, it's a tablecloth, and it's a purse to put the tablecloth in. It actually it exists as a structural element because typically we would put a veil over it if it was set on the altar, and it actually keeps it rigid. There's no holy reason behind the burse. It's actually very practical. And most of the things we do in liturgy actually had a very practical start. And then we give them all sorts of fancy things and stories about them. But it's a cup, it's a plate, it's a napkin, it's a placemat. Better than a tablecloth. It's a placemat. Okay? That's what we're bringing forward because we're setting a table. But setting a table is a part of welcoming people, right? So we don't just kind of slap it forward. We have it beautifully set up back here.
And make sure we take it up.
And you make sure when you take it up, you hold it. I should have had one out here. And you put your hand on the top because it's super awkward to throw your silverware on the floor before it makes it to the altar, okay? So you hold it up, you put your hand on it, you bring it forward. And as we do with everything that we offer on this table, so you walk forward, you pause, you place it, and you just place it right here on the edge. Okay, don't try to go in too deep because the flowers are in the way and I have to move it back anyways because I got to be able to unfold the placemat. You place it, pause, and then, as we typically do in the church, you bow as an acknowledgement. Just your head. You don't have to do a full bow. You just bow in acknowledgement. And then I bow as a way of saying thank you for offering this and bringing it forward. Okay? Rule of the church. If you have something in your hands, don't bow. Okay? So don't bow before you put it down. Hold it, put it down, bow your head. Imagine that you're carrying a candle. You do not bow when you hold a candle because you do not want to set your hair on fire. Okay? But that's just a general rule. If there's something in your hands, don't bow. Wait until you've put it down. Acknowledge the interaction that's just happened. But we set the table, okay? So a part of this is, as a greeter, you've welcomed people in, and then we say, we're now going to eat together. And so we begin to set this table in a kind of ritual as a way of signifying the importance of that particular ritual. Okay? You also then bring up the bread and the wine. Now, one way that we do welcome people in here is we invite other folks to bring up the bread and the wine. Okay? And the bread and the wine, the way it used to happen in the church is everyone would gather on a Sunday morning and everyone would bring food. Lots of food. They would bring food for lunch. They would bring all the food that they're going to eat. It's traditional to often have your food blessed in other cultures, so you would bless it and you take it home. You would often bring that food forward as offerings, and what would happen is, usually in big churches, there's a whole bunch of deacons. And what they do is they go through the food. And they pick out the best bread and the best wine to use for Eucharist that day. So everyone had their own homemade wine, everyone had their own homemade bread, okay? And you bring it forward, and then the rest of that food often went to feed the clergy, because that was one of the ways in which clergy were paid, is food that people brought. People weren't necessarily bringing money to the church. It was a trade economy. And that food was also then used to give away to those who were hungry. Okay? But of all of the gifts that y'all make at home, the ratatouille that you make and the soup that you make and the bread that you bake, those are the gifts that we give to God, that God can then use them as gifts for other people. And we pick out of those gifts the ones that we are going to use as the kind of symbol of that entire practice of gift giving as a way of life that we have. And so deacons used to go through and pick that stuff out, and that would become the bread and the wine used for the Eucharist that day. Now we've streamlined it down. I grew up in a church where the only time that would happen was actually at Easter Pascha. We would always bring, I remember my mother packing this big basket of all these yummy good things, and it would be blessed by the priest at the end of the Easter Vigil service in this complete chaos of baskets that had colors and eggs and all sorts of things in them, and meat and vodka and all the things that you couldn't have during Lent. At 3 in the morning in my church, because I'm Russian, not Greek, and the Greeks do it earlier and faster, and the Russians do it forever. So, yeah, I just diss the Greeks. The Russians suffer longer. Okay, so we bring forward those gifts as a part of what we bring as a community. And so the greeter either does it themselves as a part of the service or invites other people to bring it forward. It's a beautiful place in the service where if it's somebody's birthday, that's a really awesome opportunity to invite them to participate in a special way. If it's an anniversary, grab the couple and ask them to bring it forward. Okay? It's a wonderful way to celebrate that we do all of this together. Greeters then are also, they take the offertory, and the way it works currently in this church, and that has shifted a little bit with the pews, is we begin at the back here now. We begin at the back. Same thing with when we do the Eucharist. Typically in churches you begin at the front, but we did it from the front one day and it was sheer chaos and there was a big knot of people up there, and so we decided logistically we were going to start from the back. The greeters gather the offering, and then they help guide people to communion. At this church, it's really not all that complicated, though today, to be honest, it occurred to me that it might be helpful to have somebody up front so that we can actually have a little bit more effectively 2 lines without people running into each other as they try to get over to the wine and whatnot. But the job of the greeter is to kind of help people give a sense of the order of the service and know what the next step is. And that's especially helpful for people who are new. Okay, if you're new, you don't really know what to do. And even if you've been told by me that this is how you put your hands forward and you're going to get up in this order, you don't remember that. Okay? If you're new, you're still busy like, which book am I holding and which paper and da-da-da-da. So the greeter kind of helps provide a little bit of welcome even during the liturgy and some order around that. Bree.
Something that not greeters can also do to help welcome new folks is be the person that hands them the open hymnal to the right page or whatever book we're in.
Yep.
I know I still get lost in the chaos, so I just listen to everybody singing beautifully. But new folks might want to follow along, so hand them the book.
Yep. Yeah, so handing the book. Part of that is greeters. Invite people to sit next to somebody who you know can help guide them through the liturgy, okay? That is often helpful. All of you who are here, be willing to sit next to somebody who might be new. It may be that you want to let the greeter know, hey, I'm willing, if someone new comes in, I'd be happy to help this Sunday. Honestly, if there's some Sunday when you're like, I just need to be me and God for a little while, you know what, that's okay. Say that. We are in different places on different Sundays, so. Pat.
Oh, I was just going along with what you said. I also tell them that the service is in the bulletin.
Yep.
So they won't, like I wanted to, go through the common prayer book.
Yeah.
Especially if they're Episcopalians visiting from somewhere else. But I always tell them that the program, that the entire service is in the program.
Okay.
And the other thing I was going to ask, once you get the chairs, will it be as much of a conflict in people of communion?
I don't know. We need to figure out the best it'll be similar because the chairs are still going to be in this general arrangement. So what Pat was saying is showing people the bulletin. I have noticed, because I watch people, that sometimes they don't quite get that message. So it is helpful to take a moment, show them, here's the prayers. This hymn right here, it's going to be in the blue hymnal. The one that says 1982. This one over here, it's going to be in Levis, which is the sort of red and black. Take some time if you're able to, or put them next to somebody who can take that time if the greeter can't do it themselves. It's often helpful to ask if, when someone comes in, introduce them, oh, where are you visiting from? Oh, if they're from out of town, the likelihood is that they're an Episcopalian or they have some connection, because out-of-town people aren't just going to show up at this church necessarily. Oh, are you an Episcopalian? Oh, great. Just so you know, everything is in the bulletin rather than the Book of Common Prayer. If they're like, oh, I'm just visiting from the neighborhood, and ask, are you familiar with the Episcopal service? No? Great. Just so you know, everything's in the bulletin. Letting them know, helping them get comfortable and guiding them to that, because there's just a lot of shuffling that we do. And I've tried to reduce that some, but it's still complicated. Greeters also note who you do a count. So one of the things that has to happen before the peace is you need to count how many people are in the church. You should be including me in that count. We do have a little slot for children and newcomers, but there should be a total number written in Arabic numerals. Please don't make me count the number of lines and a cross through them while I'm up there. Because I look at that number and I actually break up the number of pieces of bread based on that number. So I don't count precisely, but I'm like, oh, we've got 20, that's about a half a loaf, and I break it up. But if we've got 40 people in here, I know that I have to break in smaller pieces. But you can't make me count the little dot lines, because I just can't in that moment.
Pro tip, tally on the back, write the number on the front.
Yes, that helps. Write the number. You can note the number of children, though I don't actually record that anywhere. If they're newcomers, that's sometimes helpful to know, but mostly it's helpful for me to know their names by that point. But it's important to take that count. I use that piece of information. That little piece of paper gets slipped into the bread, okay? So you do a count. You also note who doesn't come up to communion and perhaps why. Now, if it's an able-bodied person and they look like an able-bodied person, don't go say, why aren't you taking communion, Bernadine? Don't you know you're... That's super awkward for people, okay? But if it is somebody who looks like maybe they have mobility issues in particular, ask, would you like to receive communion, or would you like the priest to come to you? Because the greeters take communion last so that you can tell me, it used to be that Jerry would receive communion and I would bring it to him. James, often when he comes, is just not always able to get up. And so Pat will tell me, James needs to receive communion. But we've frequently had people who just can't get up, or it's just too much work. I've done that for Laura as well. So just check. If someone who typically receives communion doesn't, just ask, would you like Mother Maria, Reverend Maria, to bring the communion back to you? If they're a new person and they look like they may have it, just check. But no shaming. If they don't take communion, that's fine. But part of what you do then when you go forward and receive communion is you tell me, this person needs to receive communion, okay? And if you are a friend of somebody who is here, who may not be able, let them know, and then make sure the greeter knows that this person would like me to bring them communion in their seat, okay?
We don't count the Zoom, because I know we have about 2 or 3 people that Zoom in, so we don't have to worry about that, because I always...
No, you don't have to count the Zoom. In theory, Burke is supposed to be writing it down for me, and I pretty much always forget to look. But I should do that. But yes, we have a list for the Zoom. You don't have to count that. And just so you know, I'm supposed to record 2 things in our book of services. I'm supposed to record how many people are here and how many people actually received communion. And so, I generally remember like, oh, one person didn't receive, so I can adjust that number. There was something else I was going to say about. One thing that we do at this church is at the end of the service, we shut these doors. It is a shameless, shameless ploy to keep people in church or in the parish hall, okay? There's nothing magical about this, but what it does is it makes people come by here where I have an opportunity to say hello to them and to welcome them, where maybe there's a couple people out here who can say, oh, would you like to sit down and have coffee with us, okay? Because the liturgy that we do here extends to everything that happens here and out here. Okay? As we go, what we do here is meant to extend throughout our week. And so this is just a shameless, like, come this way, come and have coffee with us. Yes, you have to be social for a little bit. People who don't want to be social are perfectly good at slipping right out. They know how to do it. Okay, those of you who have been greeters, is there anything that in particular that I am missing or that you think should be important, that is important to highlight?
Something not really as greeters, but for everyone. And you mentioned it a bit, but knowing people by name is really important, and for everyone to know someone by name. I feel like it's one thing that's owned by ourselves, and it helps people to feel seen. And the other thing, if anyone is interested in becoming a greeter and is new to the church, most of the time when you see a lovely new face in the hall, they have been here before, and they're probably related to somebody. So I always just ask, have you been with us before? And they'll say, yes, many years ago. I'm like, oh, well, I've never met you before. I'm Bree, and continue on. But just be aware that not all new faces are actually new around here.
And this is actually, I teach a class in ethics sometimes to the diocese, and I do this book by a woman named Tracy West, who is an African-American woman, and she has an entire chapter about visiting a church of her own denomination. She is an ordained minister. She has an entire chapter about visiting a church of her denomination and being made to feel incredibly unwelcome because she was immediately identified as a newcomer because she was black, and the church was almost entirely white. And so their assumption was, well, a black person obviously isn't a part of our church. Or much less our denomination. And she's like, I'm actually a pastor in this denomination. So figuring out how to say that, I really love what you said, Bree, is, oh, have you been here before? Because it acknowledges that maybe you have, and I just haven't met you. That's even more important in big churches, and it's kind of awkward in small churches, because we actually kind of do know the people that have shown up, but we don't know people that may be coming back and whatnot. So that's a really great way to say it. Have you been here before? It's nice to meet you.
For the trick I've always used is, I don't think we've met. I'm Paula.
There's a great way to do it.
Oh, however it is, but it's like, yeah, we met 3 weeks ago, and you're like, it's fine.
Yep.
Or I'm bad with names.
Yes.
I'm bad with names. Can you remind me of your name? Is
Yep.
another one I do a lot.
Yep. Okay, so we haven't met before. I don't think we've met. There's all sorts of ways to frame it that don't make people feel like they're new. Because some people, even if they're new, just don't want to feel that way. They don't want to stick out in any way. Margaret.
I want to ask, we still have the book out in the on the table.
Yes.
The possibility of, if you are
Forced to go through the doors with Janet.
Yeah. Remember, the gauntlet is that way.
if you can catch the new people or the visitors before they leave, to invite them to sign the book if they would like to.
Yeah. Yeah, and just so you know, if you are going to be a greeter or if you ever get stuck in this position, read this list. There's much more detail in here than I went through. If there's something missing, let me know. We can always modify it. We will put this up on the website. It will be a Google Doc, so it's very easy to edit and keep updated. But we do have a guest book, and just so you know, I try to meet with everybody who signs the guest book. So I have had coffee or a beverage, usually coffee or tea, with pretty much everybody that has visited this church in the last 5 years. Or I have at least reached out to them. If they don't respond to me, I'm not gonna bug them. But I put their emails in our database and they get the newsletters, and some of those people I know read the newsletters because I can tell if y'all are reading our newsletter. I can actually go see it, and sometimes I check. I'm curious if some of the newcomers are actually reading it. Sometimes they unsubscribe, and that's fine. So, but I do try to make an effort to greet people. And always, if you can, and if you get the sense that they're open to this, come and introduce them to me after the service, okay? I know I'm sometimes running around, but I do try to be available. One thing that we are gonna do is we are gonna talk a little bit more about safety, and we're not gonna do that today. But a couple of us, raise your hand if you went to the de-escalation training. So there was we did a de-escalation training. Well, Saints Peter and Paul invited Portland Street Response to do a de-escalation training. And there were probably about 5 of us from St. Philip's that were there. Maybe more. Diana was there, Johan, Janet, Anna. And it was very helpful, except that it was really geared a little bit more towards people like kind of one-off encounters with people on the street. People that come into the church for the most part and that are agitated tend to be people that actually we have some kind of relationship or connection with, typically because we've seen them throughout the week and whatnot. We're going to talk a little bit about that training and figure out how to kind of condense it for our situation a little bit more. There's a couple things I want to highlight. We've already highlighted them. Ask people's names. Your body posture matters a whole lot, okay? This feels a lot different than this, okay? And when somebody is agitated, if they're fidgeting, if they're turning in their seat, if they're picking their skin, if they're muttering to themselves, those are all signs of stress and anxiety, which may be due to us, it may be not due to us. The more that you can be welcoming, come to them, put your hands in your pockets. Stand a little bit back and casual. Okay? Don't get in their space. One thing that's really important, if people do erupt, and many of them you could probably call me over, especially if it's before the service. We'll have to talk about during the service, but if someone is super agitated, call over someone that they may know and then leave the space, okay? Leave the space. I know our instinct is to want to stay, and I think sometimes the instinct is to want to protect me. Don't worry about protecting me. I'm quite capable, actually. But part of that is give people space, step back and away from them, because the more people that are around, the more it just escalates and makes them feel like they're being watched. So just empty the room. If it's in the narthex, come and step in here. Keep your ear out. I will certainly let you know if I really need help. You will definitely know when I need it. But step back, okay? Give some space. Don't, give people the opportunity to, ask them questions. Can I get you a drink of water? Hey, would you like me to take a walk around the block with you? Those kind of things that just a little bit distract, okay? We're going to talk a little bit more about what that might look like here, given that I'm especially aware that a lot of our older folks don't have the kind of mobility to necessarily go up and, take a walk with somebody, and what that might look like. And especially what's different for us is we often know the people. Portland Street Response, they may be showing up to someone on the streets that they've never met. We know Carl, we know Taisha, we know folks who come in, and we know Shay Shay, and we know that Shay Shay is going to go raid the fridge. It's just what she does. And so, part of it is find someone who might know them and recognize them and kind of try to make that connection. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. I would like... I'm going to wrap this up unless there is anything that must be said. Okay, friends, you are all greeters. Whether you are greeting at the door or not, you are all a part of welcoming people. So if you would like to be a greeter, vestry is supposed to do that. They're kind of rotate through. I have noticed we end up with about 3 or 4 people who just greet all the time. If you would like to be a greeter, let me know. We can put you on that liturgical ministry list. The more people we have, the fewer times you have to do it. And so if it's something that you kind of want to do but don't want to do all the time, great. If it's something that you love and that's your thing, you let Rebecca know in the office so that she can just put you in there more often. So thank you very much, and we will pick up next week with the next topic that I can't remember. Oh, reading and praying, I think that's next week. All right, thank you all.